I want to greet each one and all of you who have flocked to our conference, and I would be tempted to greet some of you, many of you friends, one by one. Please let me say hello and welcome to the U.S. Ambassador, Mr. Diaz. But for the Arab world and for the south shore of the Mediterranean Sea, I can but recall the words of Sheikh Ramouchi, who is here among us, whom I have met a long time ago, and I have had the pleasure of meeting with recently again in Tunisia. We are aware what Sheikh Ramouchi's long political and religious itinerary is. Also, I want to recall our friend Émile Poulain, the master of us all, a great scholar in the history of the West and of Christianity. We find a gathering here of different cultures: Western culture, Christian culture, Arab culture. All of this in order to try and understand this Arab Spring. The Arab Spring has been a big surprise of history. So much so that the 21st century, in a way, has opened with that fateful 9/11, 2001, those terrible attacks in New York City that we all deplored. Yet, after those events, we have seen the establishment of a certain ideology, the long-prepared, always latent ideology of the clash of civilizations between Islam and the West. As if by their own nature, by their own DNA, the secular Christian West and the Muslim world were inevitably doomed to conflict, destined to clash. Almost as if in the culture, in the nature, in the character of those universes, there was an inbuilt impossibility of reconciliation, cooperation, and common destiny. No, this view of the clash of civilizations and religions was especially difficult, I would say impossible, for the Mediterranean basin, because the Mediterranean Sea is the sea where the West and the Arab world, Islam and Christianity, live together, where ancient, time-honored Christian minorities live on the south shore of the Mediterranean, those early Christian communities, the communities of the origins. Yesterday, Sheikh Ghannouchi was saying that Iraq is a museum of religions, as it were. But just think of Lebanon. Think of Syria, that is going through a terribly difficult moment. However, Muslim communities live in Italy, in France, and throughout Europe. So how should we live together then? A second facet, a second aspect emerged in the 10 years from September 11, 2001, and that is the relationship between Islam and democracy. The relationship, in fact, between Islam and democracy in the view of the international public opinion. Was it ever possible? Many observers wondered. Was it possible to have democracy in the Islamic world? Well, here, in the eyes of many, there appeared only a possible alternative. Either or, either extremism, either radicalism, or, on the other hand, dictatorship. either or. And in the end, with some sadness, but with a measure of realism that resembled cynicism, a measure of realism that bordered with cynicism, people said that in order to keep the Arab masses tranquil, it took dictators. Dictators were needed. And on this ground, or against this background, the political relationships between the north shore of the Mediterranean and the south shore developed up until on December 17th, 2010, the Tunisian Mohamed Bouazizi, with his tragic gesture, sparked the movement that has been called the Arab Spring. A big surprise of history. A process that is ongoing, a process which has begun a year ago. A process which takes place 10 years, a full decade after 9/11. What is then the Arab Spring? We need to understand that, and in order to understand that, we need to listen to the voices of its protagonists, because the stories of the Arab Springs are very different among them. The story of Tunisia is not the story of Egypt, and it's not the tragic story of Syria that worries us no end because of the terrible toll in human lives that it is taking. Dear friends, I have been, a few days ago, I was in Tunis, and I was received by the Minister of Interior of Tunisia, and the Minister of Interior of Tunisia was accustomed to visiting the building of the ministry, but not accessing it by the main door, the main entrance, the one used by ambassadors and prefects and politicians and various authorities. He would come in through the back door, the door leading to the cells underneath the floor where he had spent a long time previously. As I reminded him of that, the minister replied me in a striking manner. You see, he said, many former prisoners go to power, and then they themselves become torturers, tormentors of others, imprison their opposers after being imprisoned themselves. But he assured me that this is not the way that he is going to go. He said, our choice, our way is a choice for democracy. Indeed, in Tunisia, a religious party is part of the coalition that governs together with the socialist and the secular party, which is a very interesting and decisive fact indeed for a country such as Tunisia, which is now working at its constitution, which constitution is meant to be a new national compact. So, dear friends, the Tunisian story is a very special one indeed. All right, but all of the Arab Springs are transforming the Mediterranean basin, just because the Mediterranean basin may indeed become the sea of the encounter in democracy. The Mediterranean basin can truly become the sea of democracy. And in a democratic climate, religious communities, political and cultural, different political and cultural backgrounds may indeed meet and work together. And this is, of course, of the utmost interest. But we are not here only to say how interesting the ongoing process is. We are here also to mention the difficulties that this process is coming up against, and that it will come up against in the future. In the Arab and in the Muslim world, dear friends, the status of the other, the Christian, the Jew, has been met in the past, in the ancient and more recent past, has received certain solutions. Christian communities live or survive in Egypt, in Syria, in Iraq, etc. However, today, religious pluralism, social diversity, ideal pluralism require a new framework for coexistence. I take this opportunity to greet Monsignor Bustros, who's an old friend of the Community of Sant'Egidio. Many times, I was saying, during the Arab Spring, religious minorities such as Christians feel insecure, feel unsafe. It's as if the dictatorship offered more security and safety than democracy. This is an old way of thinking which we believe should be overcome. I believe that we're not here to praise the Arab Spring, but rather we're here in order to understand the phenomenon of the greatest importance, because we want to say that the North and the South Shore of the Mediterranean Sea, in a climate of cooperation, can thrive, and we must build the new framework of relations and a new framework of democracy. And yet, my dear friends, I need to confess one thing. The history of Italy is the history of democratic country. And because of that history, and because of the sympathy that I, as a Christian, feel for different believers, people who believe in different faiths, I do think that our quest, our research, our attention should be aimed, or actually should be based upon sympathy and solidarity or empathy, and not on distrust. We need to do away with the distrust, the lack of confidence between our worlds, if we are to build a context of mutual support, because this sympathy, this empathy, this solidarity is the deepest key for the understanding of Mediterranean culture. You see, a decade ago, the relationship between the North and the South Shore of the Mediterranean was indeed very different. Today, I believe we have a chance to build a new relationship between these two worlds, the West and the Muslim world, the Christian world and the Islamic world, the North and the South, a new relationship between two worlds. And the key to the building of this new world is the rediscovery of the value and the meaning of freedom and the meaning of democracy. Dear friends, this conference that we are now inaugurating, with its very tight agenda, is intended as a gesture of great attention to the Arab Spring. Is meant to be a moment, or rather a process, by which we will listen to the various voices, we will look at the various facets of the Arab Spring, because the story is not over yet. And in the face of this ongoing story, I want to give you the expression of all of our interest and all of our sympathy. Thank you very much.
Well, on behalf of everybody here, I would like to thank our minister, Mr. Andrea Riccardi, first of all, for his presence here at the beginning of our working day, and also for the kind words he addressed to the audience. I believe that basically he grasped the reason why we are here. We have realized in the last year that what could be a very long and troubled time in the history of the West and of the Arab world. I'm talking about that decade, as the minister had mentioned, which started with 9/11, and that decade could continue for who knows for how long, with the consequences which were unforeseeable and quite dramatic. And what Minister Riccardi has defined as a surprise of history is also a great opportunity, a great chance for us. And we are here to say that we do not want to have this chance taken away from us. And there are many difficulties out there, many problems. This process started and is far from being over, and you can hear the voices of the disillusioned people, those who say, well, everything is going to end in a way that's even worse than it was to begin with. But I believe that if we are here is to look at these developments with empathy, with participation, being aware that whatever is going to happen in the Arab world is going to compel us and involve us as Westerners, as people living around the Mediterranean basin, as people living in this world, and then as believers. Therefore, I would like to thank our minister, Mr. Riccardi, for his kind words, and I would like to ask all those who are scheduled to speak for our first panel discussion to please join me here at the table. Thank you.
Sì, Cannuscio.